There you go. So here in the Essay 2 content, this video here will really help you. And I'm not showing it, am I? There we go. So this one, sorry, I'm having technical issues today again. This one is kind of an overview of what we talked about last time about the reverse outline. But just the video seemed to help a lot of people as well. And then these two, so revising for style, this is a short reading, and I'm going to cover most of it in this. So this is kind of like my notes based on this reading. So definitely read this for full details. But this one should be kind of brief to the point, should kind of help you out quite a bit. And it's just a little PowerPoint PDF that I made for all of this. And so this one, we're talking about revising for style. So it's important to understand what style is in terms of academic writing. So the bullet points I pulled from the reading says a writer's style is what sets his or her writing apart. And if you ever read, novels or short stories or anything like that, you probably know that you like certain writers, and a lot of times it's because of the way that they write, the style of their writing. People just, really good writers just have a way of using the right words, the right word combinations to really express something that makes it really easy for us to kind of visualize, understand, take part of, have an emotional reaction, any of those types of things. It's just a skill of professional writers, right? But even if you're not a professional writer, each one of you does have your own style. Whether that's perfectly suited for academic writing versus writing poetry, that's completely up to you and what you're able to do. But these ones talk about how to identify your style, right? So style is the way writing is dressed up or dressed down to fit the specific context, the specific purpose, specific content, and specific audience. So these are a lot of things that a lot of writers don't think about when they're writing an essay for an English course. Think about the context, the purpose, the content of the essay, and the audience or the intended audience. So as I said before, if you think about the audience, who might be someone that would read your essay, regardless of whatever your topic is, think about who that person is, and that'll help you discover what kind of style you should be writing for. Same thing with the context. If you're writing something and it has to do with a larger viewpoint, a larger vantage point, a big piece of society or something like that, the context can be important, right? What's your purpose? Do you have a purpose in writing? You might not know what your purpose is, but you always have a purpose in writing. And purpose here doesn't mean like to get a good grade, right? Purpose here means the actual writing itself, the essay itself. What is the goal of this essay? And if you can really identify your thesis statement, that's probably your purpose. You want to convince people that your point of view is correct, or you want to make sure that they understand these experiences that you had. That's your purpose. And then the content is all the stuff you provide them in order to understand the purpose, in order to understand how it fits into context, right? So all these are separate, but they do work together. And there's no one easy way to go through and say, yep, I'm doing really well with context. I'm doing really well with purpose. I'm doing really well with content, so on and so forth, because it is kind of a big picture thing. But how you understand all these is through these smaller things, your word choice, your sentence structure, the voice that you use, right? All of these will help inform all of this stuff here. So understanding that you can read individual words and individual sentences and say, well, I'm saying this, but I could say it better. Maybe I'm being too wordy. Maybe I'm not being descriptive enough. Maybe I'm being overly descriptive and my audience is lost because I've included way too many details about this thing and now they're confused, right? And looking at one sentence at a time, you'll discover that. Most of us won't do that. It's a lot of work. It takes a long time. But the better you get at writing this way, the less time you have to spend on the back end on that revision part. And then how you choose your words and structure your sentences, it should achieve a certain effect, right? It should do something. No one ever wants to write something, just like no one ever wants to say something that no one ever cares about, right? So what is it you're trying to do? What's the purpose for that sentence? If the purpose for that sentence is to help support the topic sentence, yay, it's got a purpose. Are you achieving that goal, right? And using all of these is how you actually do that. Right? I'm going to show you a bunch of examples later on, but I just want to make sure you understand the basics of the style. And so pretty clearly, it isn't right or wrong. Some styles are perfect, but when applied to a different kind of essay with a different purpose or different audience, it's no longer perfect. It doesn't fit that style anymore, right? So you want to think about all those things together. So we look at these two examples here, right? And this one specifically is from the reading, but it's also really hard to understand. So look at the first example of it. Experiments show that heliconius butterflies are less likely to ovipost on host plants that possess eggs or egg-like structures. These egg mimics are an unambiguous example of a plant trait evolved in response to a host-restricted group of insect herbivores. I'm already confused. I don't know what a heliconius butterfly is. Is that a type of butterfly? Not a clue, right? Avipose. I know avi is like Latin root for egg, so it's something to do with egg post, egg after post. I don't know. I'm confused, right? Egg-like structures, like what's an egg-like structure that isn't an egg, right? I'm just very confused. These egg mimics are an unambiguous example of a plant trait evolved in response to a host-restricted group of insect herbivores. Now I'm just like, I give up. I'm totally lost. So the same writer can write it this way instead, understanding that the audience might be different. Heliconius butterflies lay their eggs on passiflora vines. In defense, the vines seem to have evolved fake eggs that make it look to the butterflies as if eggs have already been laid on them. So I still don't know what a heliconius butterfly is. I'm not exactly sure what a passiflora vine is, but now at least I know this is some kind of vine that these butterflies like to lay their eggs on. I guess it's bad for the vine because the vines in defense have these little fake eggs they put on their vines to trick the butterflies into thinking there's already eggs on them, and therefore they won't lay the eggs on them. So I'm like, oh, I can understand this. I don't understand this 100%, but I understand the purpose of this because the style of this one is written for someone like me, someone who doesn't study butterflies and flora and egg laying things and stuff like that. The first one was written for people that study that kind of stuff. So they probably know what avipose means. They probably know what an egg-like structure would be. They know what an egg mimic is. They might understand what a host-restricted group of insect herbivores is. I don't. I'm not that kind of scientist, right? So the style has to change for the audience, for the purpose. So most of your writing, you're not going to write it like this, right? If you're writing a biology lab report, yeah, maybe, right? But in academic writing for like English courses or psychology courses or something like that, you're probably going to write it more like this because your audience is people that will understand what you're talking about versus in this one, vastly different audience. So you want to think about those things in terms of your own topics. The easiest way to do this is if you have an essay that's like a personal essay where you're writing about your own experiences. If you do that, it's easy to kind of think about the audience as someone who doesn't know you. And if the audience is someone who doesn't know you, that informs you that you have to include so many specific details that they fully understand the story that you're trying to tell them. Whereas if you're writing it for like your best friend or a really close family member or something like that, they already know you pretty well. You probably wouldn't have to include such specific details because they already know who you are. They might have heard some of these stories before, but a stranger hasn't. So it's going to be very, very different words and sentences you have to include to make sure that audience understands what it is you're talking about. When it comes to a topic that isn't personal, let's say you're writing about gun legislation or something like that. Well, I guess that's kind of personal too, but it's a broader kind of topic that isn't just about you, right? Then it's a little more difficult to think about, well, what style do I have to write this in for this kind of audience? So that's when it really makes sense to think of this kind of imaginary audience. What's the kind of person that might read a paper about gun legislation? And off the top of your head, you can probably split into two main camps, right? There's pro-gun legislation people and anti-gun legislation people. So then you kind of decide, do I want to write for both of these people or just one of them? And by narrowing that down, it makes it easier to change your style or adapt your style for that specific kind of audience. And it doesn't take long to think about what this audience might be. And doing so can make your essay so much stronger because you'll be able to write in a way that that audience understands, making the essay stronger and clearer. So you think about word choice as well. So it's just a part of it. And when we say academic writing and word choice, excuse me, I don't mean get out your thesaurus or right click everything and look for thesaurus words that sound fancier, right? Sometimes you can do that and it's beneficial, but usually it just makes you sound kind of weird. So we don't mean by, use really fancy, complicated multisyllabic words. We just mean make sure that the word choice is appropriate for what you're talking about. So the three ones you want to think about are be concise, right? Don't have a really long wordy sentence when a shorter one with fewer words will achieve the exact same purpose. And we're bad at this because when we speak, we add a bunch of extra stuff when we speak. So when we write, we tend to do the same thing, right? But writing, you don't have to be so wordy in your writing, because if I didn't fully understand a sentence, I can read that sentence again. It doesn't have to be this really long, drawn out sentence that I'm only going to hear one time. I can reread it as many times as it takes me to understand what it's talking about. So it's actually easier in writing to be concise. Get rid of all these extra words. Be precise, right? Make sure you're using words. They say active verbs, concrete nouns, and specific adjectives to really help the reader see what it is you're talking about. Whether it be something that's really difficult to understand or something that's relatively easy to understand, the more precise your word choice is, the clearer it's going to be in their mind, right? And think of like little simple examples. If I say, hey, I really like that brown dog, am I being very precise? Well, it depends. If it's the only dog around and it's clearly brown, I'm probably talking about that dog. But what if there's a whole bunch of brown dogs and I'm only talking about a specific one? What words would I have to add in there to make sure that you are looking at the same dog that I'm talking about, right? Maybe I would have to include a more specific type of the color brown. Maybe I'd have to include something about the collar the dog was wearing, if it's got a leash on it or not, if it's got a certain tail wag or not. Anything that would help make sure that they're looking at that dog that I want them to look at. I wouldn't just say brown dog in a whole group of brown dogs. I'd have to be specific. Same thing with whatever you're writing about. Think about the words that you're using, and are those precise enough to where your reader fully understands what it is you're talking about? And then be aware. This goes back to audience, right? Make sure that you think about the audience that might be reading this, and make sure that you're doing all this in terms of that audience, right? Like that scientific example before, don't write for scientists the same way you would write for a normal person, right? Just think about that audience, be aware of it. And that doesn't mean read every single sentence, go, would my audience understand this? Would my audience understand this sentence? Would my audience understand this sentence? If you do, you're probably going to do really good progress on that, but that's going to take you forever, right? Think about them as a whole, right? If I read a few sentences and say, okay, am I really writing this for this kind of audience? Am I precise enough for them? Are my sentences concise enough to where it's easy to read? If the answer is yes, you're probably doing okay. If you really struggle with this, you might have to do it one sentence at a time like that, though. So it really depends on you, how good your writing was to begin with, and how strong of a writer you are coming into any essay, right? There's no easy answer. There's no one thing fix all for every single student, because every one of you writes differently. And you want to avoid repetition. This is sometimes the words themselves, sometimes it's the sentence structure, right? So I look at this first example. Running is good for a person's health. Running can be a fun activity. Running can also help people make new friends, right? This is boring because of repetition, right? And this one does both kinds of repetition. Running is good. Running can be. Running can also, right? I use the same word, running, 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 and I use the same sentence structure, right? I begin with my subject running every single time, right? And it's boring, right? No one wants to read a whole essay that's written this way. But if I can say the same thing differently, not only is running good for physical and mental health, runners often make new friends and turn what could seem like strenuous exercise into an enjoyable activity. Oh, this was much easier to read, right? I almost fell asleep reading this sentence, right? But this one, I'm still saying the same thing, but the style is so vastly improved. My word choice is better. I'm being more concise. I'm not following the same repetitive sentence structure. I've combined all of them into one long, compound, complex sentence. This is going to be a much easier essay to read for any level of reader, right? This one is good if you're in like third grade, right? This one, after third grade, you want to start writing like that, right? Maybe not fourth grade, but by high school kind of level. And certainly now in college, you want to make sure your style is more of this type, right? And if you start off writing this way, nothing wrong with that. If you need to write in short, repetitive sentences to make sure that you're staying organized, that you're staying on track, you want to make sure that all of your sentences are supporting your topic sentence, that's okay. But then you have to go back and then work on the style for these, right? But once you've got this locked in and it's organized and all these things are supporting your topic sentence, your organization is good. Now it's just a matter of revising it, right? Revise your style, make this turn into this, right? And every one of you is capable of doing that. It just takes work to do it, right? I'm going to pause real quick with that. Any questions right now? right. So I would definitely look over that again. And then this one I just put on here, it's right underneath it, revising for clarity and conciseness. And this is a really good document that's filled with lots of examples here. So we look at these ones, and I stole this from Duke University. So we're talking, and this one, it breaks it down specifically into the different types of things, right? So this is express actions in verbs, right? So we have this as the original one. The cause of our school's failure at teaching basic skills is not understanding the influence of cultural background on learning, right? And I can read this a few times, like, oh, okay, I get it. The cause of our school's failure at teaching basic skills is not understanding. Oh, the school not understanding the influence of cultural background on learning. And if I think about this, if I've read anything about this, I'm like, oh, okay, because people from different cultural backgrounds often learn different ways. And because the school doesn't recognize that, they're doing a terrible job at teaching basic skills, right? But I had to like really think about this. It didn't do a lot for me. I understood what it meant. I could think about it and get to the point of it, the purpose of it. It kind of makes sense, but it's kind of weak, right? And they tell you here why. The central verb in the sentence is. And most of us aren't going to break down a sentence grammatically like that to recognize, oh, it's the verb here that's giving us a problem. Just in the back of our minds, it's like something's not quite right with this. And this is a really important lesson because a lot of novice writers do this. They use is as the main verb in a sentence. And it's actually a really, really weak verb to use almost any time, right? So if we look at what they can revise it to, get rid of that verb is. Our schools have failed to teach basic skills because educators do not understand how cultural backgrounds influence learning. Oh, that's what it meant. And I eventually arrived at this by analyzing this sentence a couple of times. But if they would have just written it this way the first time, every one of us would have understood what they're talking about, right? And I'm sure after the sentence, they'll go on to explain in detail how different cultural backgrounds learn differently and how schools could adapt their teaching skills to understand that, right? And this just says it's so much better, right? It's the same meaning, the same intent, but this is much more effective at doing it just because of the style of it, right? So looking at these kinds of examples, you can see, oh, wait, I write sentences like this. How can I change this sentence to make it read more like this kind of sentence, right? You know, we have a string of prepositional phrases, right? So we have this one. A revision of the program will result in increases in our efficiency in the servicing of our customers, right? Way too many prepositional phrases of, in, of. It's so repetitive, it's monotonous, it's making me fall asleep just reading it, right? What if we said this instead? If we revise the program, we can serve our customers more efficiently, right? Because will result in increases in our efficiency in the servicing of our customers. Well, that's going to do it. We can serve our customers more efficiently. It says the exact same thing, just in a much stronger way. The style in this one is so much stronger. We think like this, and that's the problem, right? Because she's like, a revision of the program will result in increases in our efficiency in the servicing of our customers. And mentally, that makes sense. Result, increase, efficiency, servicing, right? But if you stop and you think about it, you can say it much more clearly this way. Again, it's okay if this is the way you write to begin with, but then it's on you to go back and revise it for style to make sure it's more concise, it's clear, it's easier to read, it's not so repetitive. Talking about choosing clear subjects, right? So the cause of our school's failure at teaching basic skills, that's a bad page break, versus our school's educators, cultural backgrounds, all these different subjects. And so they ask, which subjects are more concrete, which are easier to understand, and why? And when you think about concrete nouns, right? I'll go all the way back up to the top here. Our schools have failed to teach basic skills because educators do not understand how cultural backgrounds influence learning. Lots of concrete nouns here, right? Lots of good concrete words that makes it easy for any audience to read this sentence and understand, right? But if it's lacking something like this, The cause of our school's failure at teaching basic skills is not understanding the influence of cultural background on learning, right? Not as many concrete words. It's harder to envision this. This one, much easier to envision because of those concrete words, right? We look at this one here, right? Our more effective presentation of our study resulted in our success despite an earlier start by others. This sounds like a weird office memo or something like that. So instead, although others started earlier, we succeeded because we presented our study more effectively. Oh, that's much more concise. It's much clearer. I fully understand what they're talking about here. This one sounds like someone is trying to make me think really hard to understand what they're saying. This one reads like they want to help me understand what they are saying. Big difference between just those two. And again, it goes back to your word choice. It goes back to being concise, eliminating extra words, eliminating repetitive words is always good to go and double check for. All of these things culminate into the style of your writing, right? Some people, they just naturally write this way, right? They had really good teachers when they were young. They paid really close attention to all of the grammatical lessons in school. And so they just naturally began to write in this kind of style. And those are rare. And if you're that kind of person, that's amazing for you. For the vast majority of us, we kind of write this way, and then we got to think about it and revise it to make it sound this way, right? But again, it's one of those things. It's never too late to learn. The more you practice revision, especially on your style, the more you'll tend to write in this kind of way, which ultimately will save you more and more time down the road. And you want to write in this way because it's easier to understand. And right now, you're just writing essays based on things that you already understand. What's going to become really important in terms of your style and making sure your sentences are clear and understandable is when you're integrating outside information, when you're using quotes and paraphrases, because now you're trying to combine something you want to say with something somebody else already said. Now you're mixing two people's ideas together, and it has to be super clear and obvious what it is you're talking about. If you're writing this way, it's going to be really hard to do that, right? People that write this way, when they start to do like quotes, what they tend to do is they write this sentence and then they say, you know, what this quote means is blah, 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 blah. And you should never, ever, ever, ever use a phrase like that, right? It's your job to interpret a quote or to interpret a paraphrase when you're using outside information, but it should be so clear that that's what you're doing. You don't have to put a little sign up saying, okay, I just used this quote. I'm about to tell you what it means. It should be seamless between the two. And if you write in this way, it's going to be more difficult to do that. If you write more concise, where your point is really clear, where you use strong, concrete nouns, it's going to be easier to integrate this outside information, right? Telling you right now, so when you're working on it for the next essay, remember this. Right? Also think about these kinds of things, right? Passive voice. It was decided by the director to expand the program, right? Do we need to know it was? No. We can just say the director decided to expand the program, right? This sentence implies that he's the one that was, right? So it's just unnecessary. Instead, make the director the subject of the sentence. Here, it is the subject of the sentence, and it is a terrible subject, right? Because it's only referring to the director anyway, right? So the director decided to expand the program. Same thing with these ones. The snark was lassoed successfully. Well, who lassoed it? Oh, the snark was lassoed successfully by the animal control officer. Okay, but it's still passive. The animal control officer successfully lassoed the snark, right? Now the animal control officer is the subject, right? Successfully lassoed is the verb, and the snark is the object that the animal control officer acted on. So this is an active construction because we have the subject doing the action instead of the object having something done to it, right? And this isn't grammatically incorrect, but it's so passive, this is stronger, right? This one just makes more sense. And this is a good example because I have no idea what a snark is, right? I meant to look it up and I didn't, but it doesn't matter. It's something that an animal control officer lassoed, right? So I would just say it that way. The animal control officer successfully lassoed the snark. Yay, makes perfect sense. So that active voice is always going to be better. And people get confused a lot between passive and active voice. The general rule is make sure that the subject is doing the thing to the object, right? If I had here, the firefighter put out the fire, right? Subject is firefighter. What he did was put out, and the object he did that to was the fire, right? You wouldn't say the fire was put out by the firefighter. It just sounds a little wrong. It's not grammatically wrong, but it's passive because it makes it seem like the fire was doing something when it wasn't. The firefighter did something, right? On the other hand, if you're writing a sentence where the fire is the subject and you say the fire destroyed the building, yeah, that makes sense because the fire is the subject. You wouldn't say the building was destroyed by the fire, right? It's passive. It sounds lazy, right? The fire is the thing that's doing something. So give that first credit, right? Excuse me. And then these ones, beginning with expletive constructions. This doesn't, in this sense, it doesn't mean like curse words and stuff like that. So you have this one. It is vital that we delete the word absolutely, right? It is vital, really? Well, we just say we must, right? We must delete the word absolutely, right? People write this because they think it sounds fancier. They think it sounds more academic. It doesn't. It's just wordy. It doesn't really add anything to the sentence, right? The difference between this one, we must delete the word absolutely, and simply saying we should delete the word absolutely, that's very different, right? So must implies that it's vital. So just write it this way. You get rid of that it again. It is, again, very, very weak construction. Don't use it is unless you necessarily have to, right? And you almost never have to at the beginning of a sentence. There are 5 car alarms that are blaring in the parking lot, right? We can definitely pare that down. 5 car alarms are blaring in the parking lot. Yep, nice and easy, right? We don't need there are, that are in the parking lot. Just 5 car alarms are blaring in the parking lot. Very concise, very to the point, right? And this doesn't seem like it's a big difference, but if you read 3, 4, 5, 30 pages of this style of writing, you're going to get bored and tired very, very quickly, even if the topic is interesting, right? Because the style helps make your topic more interesting. Same thing with this one. It is possible that the dog did not steal the cantaloupe after all. Well, instead, we could say the dog might not have stolen the cantaloupe after all, right? And I would say even this is unnecessary. The dog might not have stolen the cantaloupe because after all is implied by might not have, right? So you could even revise further and chop out this phrase. The dog might not have stolen the cantaloupe, right? Easy to do. Right? These ones too, just getting rid of words that sound important that really aren't. And again, we usually write this way because we're trying to sound better, and we're usually not. It is absolutely vital that something. Well, something is either vital or it's not vital. There's really no such thing as absolutely vital unless vital doesn't mean what vital means, right? So absolutely is just unnecessary. Their strategy is quite unique. Quite unique? How unique? What does quite unique mean? What does quite mean to you versus to me versus to some other writer or some other reader, right? It's pretty vague, right? The cat is kind of pregnant. Really? Unless you're making a joke about how fat the cat is, right? This doesn't really do anything. It's either pregnant or it's not pregnant. You can't be kind of pregnant. And what this person meant was probably, oh, they just very recently became pregnant. So they're not showing, we're not, getting ready for kittens to pop out anytime soon or anything like that. And that's probably what they meant. But kind of pregnant doesn't mean that, right? You're either pregnant or you're not pregnant. No in between there, right? So you would word it appropriately. You could say, the cat is only 2 weeks pregnant. Oh, that's clear. I get it, right? But in conversation, you might say kind of pregnant, right? He prefers wheat due to the fact that he is not gluten-free or whatever it is, right? Due to the fact that, or due to the fact of, kind of strike this phrase from your vocabulary because you can just use the word because, right? Due to the fact that sounds kind of pompous. It sounds all smarty and educational. It's really not, right? He prefers wheat because he's not, allergic to gluten, or he prefers wheat because he hates rice, whatever it is. Due to the fact that is just overly wordy. And most people, when they start to use this phrase, they get in a bad habit of using it again and again and again and again. And the reader doesn't want to read due to the fact that or due to the fact of so many times, right? I need some sort of response by Thursday, right? Some sort of, right? Which just says replace some sort of with, hey, I need a response by Thursday, right? Because a response, what sort of response it is completely up to you, whatever you're responding to, right? So you can simply say, I need a response by Thursday. So some sort of anything, you can almost always just replace this with a, right? And this one, I don't love this one, but it might help some people, right? I doubt you're going to do it, but it could help you. And these are some step-by-step directions. If you're really struggling with adapting your style or revising your style, this kind of shows you step-by-step how you can do it based on this handout. So it says underline the actions, right? Including nominalizations, implied actions, and non-verb forms. And you're like, what? That's the is thing from earlier in the handout, right? Put boxes around the verbs. So locate all the verbs in your writing and put boxes around them, right? Circle prepositions, right? All those prepositional phrases, in, with, all those types of things. And then you can go through and check them all. Scan it for passive voice, right? Making sure the subject is always doing something to the object, not the other way around. And then just kind of scan through it for repetitive words or redundant words, any of those expletive constructions, right? Most often they're just unnecessary. You can get rid of them, right? So these are specific ways to adjust your style based on all of these here. So if you forget what passive voice constructions are versus active voice, you can kind of look at this for an example. It's like, oh yeah, it's these ones. And then keep following these steps to really go through it. Most people will not do this. But what you can do is think about all these things they showed here. Look at all these different examples. So this one versus the revision here, this one versus the revision here, and see if you're doing these things in your essays just kind of as a whole. And as you're going through reading through your essay, see if you can revise those ones, all right? With the body paragraph that you're going to revise for the assignment, right? I would definitely do this. I would go sentence by sentence, revising one of your body paragraphs from essay 1, looking specifically for anything listed on this handout, right? Because if you go through and you can eliminate these or revise these and put in better word choices, you'll be amazed by how much stronger that paragraph is. Because then you can read your original paragraph and compare it to the revised one and say, oh, wow, this one is so much better, right? And it's still your words. It's still your intent. It's still the purpose that you're writing about. But it's going to sound almost like somebody else wrote it because you don't typically write that way. And the more that you look at that, the more that you analyze your own writing, the more that you understand how to double check and revise for all these types of things, the more your writing will naturally start to be that way. So you don't have to spend so much time working on a line by line revision because most of your sentences will more naturally be written that way, right? It's one of those unfair things about writing. The more you work at it at the fine level, like these types of things, in the long run, you get better. The sad thing is, if we would have started teaching you this kind of stuff back in 5th grade, you wouldn't have to worry about it right now. Every one of you would just be amazing writers already, and all of your essays would be flawless 99% of the time, right? So even though you've had these bad habits that you've repeated and repeated and repeated for, 12, 15 years or something like that, it's not hard to change, right? Writing is one of the things that's easier to change. I'm not trying to get you to change how you feel emotionally about something. That's a long haul process, right? This is much easier than therapy, right? But it does take time to look at the rules and look at the different examples to see how you can make your writing stronger. Right. Let's stop right there as well. Any questions about these ones? And again, this one, it pairs really well. So this is the original reading, revising for style. This is just like that PowerPoint PDF of like the bullet point notes from this one. And then this one says, I got styled here. This one is this one that we were just looking at, right? So it's got all the very specific examples and all the very specific different areas, right? This one I'm not going to make you watch, but it is a good video about the revision process. It actually shows an essay being revised through the entire essay revision process. So if you're really struggling with revision, definitely watch this video, all right? Excuse me, I'm not going to make you, but if you're struggling with it and you need some help, this is a really quick and easy place to get the help anytime, day or night. All right. So remember, because of the adjusted assignments, again, make sure that you turn in your reverse outline, Today, ideally, if you need till tomorrow, the next day, that's okay too. I just don't want you to fall too far behind. And then Wednesday, you want to have your revised body paragraph. Remember, it's just one body paragraph. You don't have to revise your entire essay, just one of your body paragraphs. You pick and choose, but make sure it is a body paragraph. Don't submit a revision of your introduction or a revision of your conclusion. Make sure it's a body paragraph. And then the essay, the full revision, won't be due until next Monday. Right. Any questions? All right. Well, as always, if something pops up, if you wanted to send me something to look at, I'll definitely look at it, give you some feedback. If you're stressed out that you're not doing the right thing, show me what you're working on, and I can either alleviate your stress, or I can give you some really good ideas of how to move forward so you're not stressed out about something like that. Either way, just let me know if you need any help with anything. Otherwise,